Syria is slamming the door in Erdogan's face and pushing Turkey aside, while Iran begins to clean up the mess from Saturday's explosion at the Bandar Abbas port and is pointing fingers at all directions. Welcome to Boots on the Ground, the weekly recap edition. I'm Yair Pinto, bringing you the truth about what's happening in Israel. And this time, I want to give you a broader picture of what's happening right now in the Middle East, with a focus on Syria and a closer look at the consequences of the explosion in Iran. We'll also take a look at Hezbollah's situation in Lebanon, and of course, check out what's happening with the Houthis in Yemen. So guys, let's run a quickly review of the headlines that slipped by us in the big Middle East picture this week, starting with the mess that happened in Iran. On Monday, even as fires were still burning at the port of Bandar Abbas and recovery efforts had barely begun, Iranian officials declared that they had fended off a massive and complex cyberattack. However, the truth is more complex, as reports indicate that hackers broke into the systems of one of Iran's largest banks and stole personal information on 42 million customers, including senior regime officials, military officials, and also operatives of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. So all of this comes as the fatality count in the incident in the port, in the explosion, has now risen to 70, with hundreds more injured. This is including also dozens who are now harmed and hospitalized. So satellite images of the report reveals two large craters where the initial explosions took place and widespread damage from the resulting shockwave and the fires that happened after for many, many hours and days. And although some Iranian officials are saying that they think it was an Israeli sabotage operation, the official response and the reason for this given by Iran's Interior Ministry is negligence. As the ignited materials were stored in violation of regulations, they did not disperse them. That's the official response. And meanwhile, Iran appears to be preparing for the possibility of more airstrikes by fortifying tunnels and other critical infrastructure, as satellite images show activity near underground complexes close to the Natanz nuclear site amongst the Iran-US talks. So Iran is preparing for attacks by Israel or by the United States or by other coalition forces. So political sources in Jerusalem say that the negotiations between the Trump administration and Iran are approaching a moment of truth, and there is little doubt that Iran will be willing to give up its red lines. At the same time, Israel worries that President Trump will be ready to soften his red lines in order to achieve a new nuclear deal. These fears are heightened by a new assessment that Iran has around 2,000 ballistic missiles that have sufficient range to hit Israel. And closer to home, Israel's intelligence echelon brings us news of Hezbollah's latest crisis. Over the past week, the IDF struck more than 50 terror targets across Lebanon, and all Hezbollah's Secretary General had to say about that was, there was no justification for the strike in Dahia. Lebanon should apply pressure on the world. Well, maybe someone should tell him that everyone in Lebanon who isn't part of Hezbollah is very happy to see Israel destroy his military capabilities. So they're unlikely to put pressure on anyone to try and put a stop to this. And also, just a reminder for all of you, Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. I don't know how they can have demands to the world to pressure Israel or Lebanon or anybody else. And meanwhile in Syria, a surprising development has come as the regime of Abu Muhammad al-Julani has slammed the door in Turkish President Erdogan's face. Al-Julani has ever gone a step further. He went even a step further than that, telling visiting United States Congressman Corey Mills that he's ready to consider joining the Abraham Accords under the right conditions. That's amazing. So we did not expect to hear that, But we're very, very cautious because this statement is a contradiction to other statements that have come out of this regime, even in the recent last week. El-Julani has also said in recent days that Syria will not be a threat, not even to Israel. Oh, that's good. I hope that's true, but we'll see what happens with that. You should be hoping for a peace, but also preparing for war, especially in this situation and when you're dealing with a terrorist regime. What do you think about that? Should Israel be, ready to, give up our positions in Syria, be relaxed, or should we, reinforce the military presence there? So on the one hand, that's very, very good to hear, as I said. On the other hand, talk is cheap, and especially when you're talking in the Middle East. And that holds true for threats, promises, commitments, and pretty much everything else. The thing to watch is actions. And El-Julani's actions tell a different story. For instance, Turkey is moving to supply him with Russian weapons, including sophisticated air defense systems. Turkey is doing this for a few different reasons, starting with the hope that it will convince the United States to lift sanctions that were imposed when Turkey bought these Russian weapons in the first place. However, some United States lawmakers have said that giving the weapons to El-Julani undermines Israel's qualitative edge in the Middle East, and that will have the exact opposite effect on Turkey's relationship with the United States than what they say that they want. That's how it is in the Middle East. Never, never a boring moment. And everything everyone does or doesn't do has consequences that affect everything else in this region and in the world at large. So it's very complicated, but I'll try to break it down for you guys. So with that in mind, Turkish President Erdogan has also decided that he no longer wants to utilize Turkish Airlines designated slots at Israel's Ben Gurion airport. Basically, he doesn't want the major Turkish airliner, Turkish Air, to fly to the Israeli international airport, Ben Gurion. This is a very serious move that signals a broader, severe, or worsening of the economic ties between Turkey and Israel. And we'll take a look at how this might affect things moving forward. So as you see, we have a lot to talk about today, and I'm really happy to have all of you joining me here in Jerusalem. I spent some time abroad in the United States, and I just landed, woke up today at 3:30 a.m. because of jet lag. So this is how it's happening here. In Israel, it takes you a few weeks to get adjusted to the time difference between the US and Israel. So guys, we have a lot to talk about today, and let's begin. I'm Yair Pinto. This is your Boots on the Ground report of what's happening in Israel and the implementation and the effect of the events here on the world, the United States, Europe, basically everywhere. This is day 573 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the orders of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we begin, I'd like to invite you to send us a greeting in the comment section, say hello. We also appreciate every super like of any amount that you have to share with us, help us seek and share the truth of what's happening in Israel. And of course, we also invite you to click on the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So while Iran tries to project business as usual and makes tiresome rhetorical threats against Israel, this week a powerful explosion struck Shahid Raja'i port in the city of Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. And according to reports, there were 70 fatalities from the incident, with more than 1,000 other people that got injured. The regime-aligned Tasnim news agency spoke of a chaotic situation at that port, and fires continued to burn for more than 48 hours after the initial blast. Hundreds of vehicles, dozens of buildings, and hundreds of shipping containers filled with all kinds of things were damaged and destroyed. Cranes and other heavy equipment needed to load and unload ships at the port were also damaged. And the air in the entire region was heavily contaminated with toxic fumes. Okay? Despite the chaotic situation and the fact that it was impossible to even begin an investigation into the cause of this incident, regime officials almost immediately began making statements blaming each other for negligences and failures to follow safety procedures. One member of the Iranian National Parliament said, without citing any evidence, that Israeli sabotage was to blame. But other members of the regime refuted this, saying that it was an effort to deflect blame away from the failures of the port authorities. So most activities at the port were suspended until further notice, although by Tuesday morning, some loading and offloading of cargo ships appeared to have resumed in this port. What we know for sure is that the initial explosion was caused by a fire in a warehouse that held flammable materials in the Bandar Abbas customs area. And at the same time, Tasnim reported that a fuel tank at the port exploded for an unknown reason. The National Iranian Oil Company denied that the event was connected to refineries or fuel tanks and claimed that every sector of the port is operational. It is difficult to take this claim seriously, but in any case, it would seem that oil pipelines and export terminals were not damaged by the explosion or the fires. So far, no Iranian officials have admitted to knowing which containers exploded or what they contained. However, in recent months, 2 Chinese ships were reported to have docked there, and they have said to carry out the chemical sodium perchlorate. Sorry if I'm misspelling this word. Sodium perchlorate, a substance that, according to worldwide reports, serves as a key component in solid rocket fuel for Iran's ballistic missiles. Sodium perchlorate is a strong oxidizing salt considered essential in producing solid fuel, and thanks to its ability to release oxygen rapidly. This is something that is needed in rockets and ballistic missiles that reach long distances. So these properties allow quick launch and long-term storage of missiles, making the substance especially sensitive and strictly monitored internationally because of concerns for military use. And Chinese officials downplayed this and said that the responsibility for the explosion was not on their side and that there are other uses for this material other than militarily. On Tuesday, the AP news agency published Planet Labs satellite images showing the extensive damage at the explosion site in the Shahid Rajia port. And AP said that compared with images taken before the blast, one can see a large structure completely destroyed, located near containers, and it is quite possibly the same building that's seen exploding in footage after the fire there. The satellite images also reportedly show 2 large craters of about 50 meters wide. An interior minister of Iran, Eshkanada Momni, said on Tuesday that the explosion apparently occurred because of negligence and failure to follow safety procedures. This is likely to be the final word from the regime on this incident, despite the competing claims made by other officials and members of Iran's parliament. So what do you guys think about this incident? Do you think it's negligence, or is it an Israeli sabotage, or is it something else altogether? Maybe something related to the CIA and the Americans applying pressure on Iran during these negotiations. So the disaster at this port happened exactly in parallel with the 3rd round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran. So speculations and accusations quickly arose whether it was a deliberate sabotage aimed at harming the negotiations. But for now, there are no indications of that, and Israeli officials have denied their involvement. It is important to remember that it is quite possible that the explosion did indeed stem, as the authorities now claim, from negligence. Iran has long suffered misshapes because of its negligence infrastructure, its old facilities, and it struggles to repair owing to UN sanctions, because the United sanctions affect all sectors in Iran. So the economy is suffering, and also the corrupt management of Iran is causing the negligence in all sectors in Iran. So old, worn-out equipment often breaks down, even when tremendous efforts are made to keep it operational, and that's just a fact. We also had a helicopter taking the former Iranian president inside Iran for a flight and crashing, because these helicopters are very old. And getting back to the port itself, more than 2 days after the blast, Iran was still struggling to control the huge fire at the port, with flames still burning and health advisories still in effect for the city of Bandar Abbas. This city, located on the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz, at the entrance to the Persian Gulf, through which 20% of the global oil traffic passes, is a strategically vital location. So economically, it is very important for Iran. It is the country's largest commercial port. This disaster will drastically weaken Iran's already very weak economy, and it also weakens Iran's position in the negotiations with the United States of America. Now, before we continue to the mysterious cyber attack that hit Iran this week, I'd like to ask you to keep spreading the truth, help us seek and share it, share our videos on YouTube, and subscribe to TBN Israel on YouTube and on other social media platforms. You can also look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani social media accounts. Just make sure to only subscribe to the official accounts, because there are many fake accounts, so beware. And guys, 2 days after the mysterious blast at the Bandar Abbas port, the Tasnim agency, linked to the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, reported on Monday that Iran had foiled one of the broadest and most complex cyber attacks against it so far. Let's take a closer look at these claims. So the Safa Bank is one of Iran's oldest and largest banks in the Islamic Republic of Iran. It was hacked at the end of last month, and data on 42 million customers was harvested by a hacker group calling itself the Code Breakers. This included senior regime officials and officers of both the regular military and the Revolutionary Guards. The bank denies the breach, but open source media reporting has confirmed that it indeed happened. An Iranian opposition source noted that what makes the cyber attack on the bank unique is the type of its customers and their ties to the governmental and the military institutions. So publishing accounts details, personal data, and transfer records possess a serious security risk for these officials and for their personal information. So group members said that they demanded $42 million from the bank not to release the data, and gave the bank 72-hour negotiations window. According to posts on the group's Telegram channel, the bank executives refused to pay anything to protect the affected customers' details, so they released the information. Iran's cyber defense unit reported repelling another massive attack on Monday. And in addition, Iran is fortifying 2 tunnel complexes that lead to its main nuclear facility at Natanz amidst fears of an American and an Israeli strike. This emerges from recent satellite photos published by the Institute for Science and International Security ahead of the 3rd round of talks with the United States on a new nuclear deal with Iran. David Albright, the president of This institute said that the security ring surrounding the two complexes under construction for several years indicates that the underground sites in Kolang Gaz, La Mountain, said that so far the operational aspects of this area will start working. He said there is concern that Iran will use them to store highly enriched uranium, advanced centrifuges that are able to enrich uranium to weapons-grade level, and other nuclear-related materials that it has not declared of having so far. This is particularly concerning because the complexities are being built much deeper than the Fordo enrichment plant. So Iran is basically hiding all of this nuclear equipment in the middle of the ground in tunnels. So March 29 satellite images show Iran fortifying the tunnel entrances, erecting walls along a road around the mountaintop, and digging for additional walls and additional reinforcements for the tunnels and the entrances to these tunnels. Despite its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran has not allowed IAEA inspectors, the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors, to visit the tunnel complexes. And the IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, who visited Tehran last week and is now in Washington, said that Iran refuses to inform the IAEA about the purpose of the facilities near its nuclear sites. He said, "We asked them, what's this for? And they replied, none of your business." Interesting, but clearly it's a place with some important activities related to Iran's nuclear program. Grossi added that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon that is very clear, okay, that they don't have, and we must not confuse people. Iran in the past carried out many activities that were relevant or could be relevant to a nuclear weapon development process. So we should be always concerned with this situation. And Grossi concluded that the media is expressing hope that the indirect United States-Iran talks could succeed in achieving an agreement that will lead to dismantling Iran's military nuclear program. We'll see how that goes. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you think that these negotiations with Iran will work? Will we reach some kind of nuclear agreement that will, end the fears of a nuclear weapon in the hands of Iran? Let me know what you think. Just give you a few minutes. Thanks. So as for that, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Majid Takht Ravanchi, told Parliament's Foreign and National Security Committee this week that Iran has not negotiated and will not negotiate about the red lines. This is including halting uranium enrichment for its ballistic missile program. Iran and the United States announced on Saturday that the conclusion of the rounds of talks that they agreed to continue next week. However, Iranian sources say that Tehran is willing to discuss certain limits on its nuclear program in exchange for lifting sanctions, but ending the enrichment or handing over enriched uranium stockpiles as red lines with no compromise, meaning that Iran will not hand over the uranium enrichment to a third-party country, as was discussed before, with Russia being a possibility for that. So President Trump told reporters this week that regarding Iran, we are in a very good position. There will be a deal very soon. We'll have something without having to drop bombs. I want to finish this. This is what Trump said. Yet despite the optimistic statements, Jerusalem sources say that Iran is nearing its moment of truth. It will have to state its real stance on enrichment and missiles inside the room, not only, issue media statements. If it refuses to discuss those topics, President Trump will have to decide how to proceed. And the officials also say that Iran's main goal is immediate sanctions relief, but it will not compromise on its red lines. What worries Israel is whether Trump will relax the United States' red lines to secure a deal. In any case, Israel vehemently opposes any agreement that allows Iran to keep enriching uranium. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on all the latest developments regarding to Iran. And now, I want to talk briefly about an issue that is close to all of our hearts, and that is the well-being of Israel's families. Here in Israel, the aftermath of the war has left many small businesses and artisans facing significant challenges. Shops have been closed, orders have been cancelled, and families are striving to rebuild their livelihoods. Take, for example, the story of Susan's House. This is a Jerusalem-based charity that provides at-risk youth with vocational training in the arts. When Arza placed an order of 5,000 ceramic vases, it wasn't just a business transaction, it was a lifeline for this organization. The organization was on the verge of closing its doors, but that order provided the financial support needed to keep their mission alive. This is the impact that your subscription can have. Each Arza box is filled with handcrafted items made by Israeli artisans, directly supporting their work and helping them rebuild. So you can be part of this miracle by subscribing to Arza right now. And please use the code TBNIL. Again, the code TBNIL for 10% off your subscription. If you want to make a subscription, visit www.arzabox.com. Again, www.arzabox.com, and be part of the recovery and the rebuilding process of Israel. You are supporting Israeli artisans and bringing a piece of the Holy Land into your home when you make a subscription. So thank you. Now, switching our focus to the northern arena, on Sunday, the Israeli Air Force hit a Hezbollah weapons warehouse in the Dahya district of southern Beirut. The warehouse was used to store precision missiles and was the latest of more than 50 terror targets that the IDF has struck across Lebanon in the last month. Each one of these targets was hit because it represented a violation of Hezbollah, of the ceasefire understandings between Israel and Lebanon, and posed a significant threat to Israel and to its citizens. Hezbollah Deputy Chief Hassan Qasem responded to the strikes by calling on Lebanon's internationally recognized government to act against Israel's violations of the country's sovereignty. He said that on Sunday there was a strike and there was no justification. It was a political strike to change the equation, thinking they can pressure Lebanon and Hezbollah to achieve certain goals. Everyone saw that Hezbollah abides by the agreement while Israel violated it 3,000 times. We granted Lebanon the authority to be the main negotiator and to be responsible for the state's security through the army deployed south of the Litani and throughout the country. Guys, did you hear what he said? Did you catch that? This evil terrorist leader casually says that he and his organization, Hezbollah, granted the legitimate army of the state of Lebanon the authority to defend the country's sovereignty, as if that authority was his to give or take away from whoever he sees fit. I don't agree with that position, and judging from the increasingly, assertive stance against Hezbollah taken by the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people, it would appear that they don't agree with it either. So I don't think that there'll be any big hurry to follow the instructions that Qasem is trying to give them. And in fact, I think it's more likely that they are already helping Israel by giving us intelligence on where Hezbollah's weapons are stored so that we can hit them again and again in the future. And now, we're keeping our focus on the northern arena, but switching a bit further east and further north to Turkey and Syria. There are indications that the relationship between Turkey and the El-Julani regime are not going well, and we need to take a closer look at all of that situation. But before we move ahead, I want to ask you again, guys, give us a like, a comment, a share, and click the subscribe button if you haven't already to help us reach more people with what's happening in this region. And our goal of doing that, our mission is to share the truth of what's happening in this region. It's very hard to get that and to find really what's happening in this region, and then encourage you back at home to pray for the situation. That's why we do this, because we believe this is a spiritual war, and we need prayer warriors in order to help us in winning this war. So guys, I'll just take a quick sip. Thank you. Now, to get into our story, the new Syrian government of al-Julani, this is the government that formed after the fall of the Assad regime, and is headed by al-Julani, that was suspended in the past. He was a part of Al-Qaeda, which was affiliated to the Islamic State, just as a background information about this guy and who is leading Syria now. Okay? So this regime of al-Julani abruptly suspended the planned inaugural flight of the Turkish carrier A-Jet to Damascus on the 21st of April, creating an aviation crisis between the two countries. A-Jet is a subsidiary of Turkish Airlines, was forced to cancel its launch flight when the Syrian Civil Aviation Authority revoked that flight and all future scheduled flights. And according to the Middle East Eye website, sources reported that the main reason for the crisis in Syria's demands to allow Syrian airlines to operate flights to Turkey on a different basis, basically, the same basis. So Syria wants their flights to have operational capacity in Turkey as well. And currently, the parent company, Turkish Airlines, operates 7 weekly flights to Damascus, while Syrian airliners are not permitted to fly to Turkey. So that's the situation. And Turkish officials express optimism that the crisis will soon be resolved, allowing A-Jet flights to resume to Syria. But nevertheless, the tension between the countries is also reflected in Syria's early decision this year to sharply raise import duties on Turkish goods. This is a move viewed in Turkey as unfair. Syria's ruler, Ahmed el-Shara, also known as al-Julani, said in a recent interview with the New York Times that his government is negotiating deals with Turkey and with Russia, hinting at the possibility of future military support from both countries. In the interview, he also revealed that Damascus's request to have the deposed dictator Bashar al-Assad extradited for trial in the country was rejected by Russian officials. And in a related story, after Syria expressed interest in joining the Abraham Accords to the United States congressional delegation last week, Syria TV reported on Sunday that the Syrian government sent a letter to the United States of America refusing to join the accords. But sources told the Syrian channel that the government's contention is that the Abraham Accords are with states whose lands are not occupied by Israel, and therefore Syria cannot be part of them. And despite the Syrian governmental refusal, the letter affirms its determination to advance state building as an entity that does not seek to threaten any side. The sources noted that another issue raised in the letter is the presence of foreign military forces in Syrian territory, which the United States demands be removed. The Syrian government replied that this matter requires broad consultation with the Americans. So there are some issues between the Syrians, the Americans, and if they want to join the Abraham Accords. Reuters, the news agency Reuters, also reported this week that in an official letter from President Ahmed al-Shara, also known as al-Julani, to United States President Donald Trump, it was written that Syria has met most of the conditions for the removal of United States sanctions and seeks mutual understandings on the remaining outstanding issues. The letter also stated that Syria will not be a threat to any side, including Israel. Syria further says that it has set up an oversight committee for the activities of Palestinian factions in Syria and is interested in further discussions on this matter. A Syrian source close to the government in Damascus confirmed to Kan News, this is an Israeli news TV channel in Israel, in Hebrew, on Tuesday, that the two senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad officials, Khaled and Yasser el-Zafari, were indeed arrested and are not certain to be released very soon. According to the sources that were quoted in the Reuters report, the move was made at the request of the United States administration, which recently conveyed several demands to the president of Syria, al-Shara, in exchange for easing the sanctions of the United States on Syria. And in a related news, Turkish media reported last Friday that Turkey plans to grant Syria missiles that it purchased from Russia for more than $2.5 billion. According to the reports, Ankara initiated the move, amongst other reasons, to secure the lifting of United States sanctions that are imposed on Turkey. However, the Turkish site Suzuku noted that United States lawmakers said that the move would not lead to the lifting of sanctions, since it does not cancel the missile purchase from Russia. And moreover, the step could create another problem from the United States. According to the lawmakers, transferring the missiles to Ahmed al-Shara's rule in Syria might harm Israel's qualitative military edge in the region and threaten United States relations with Turkey. And speaking of relations, a political source confirmed about 2 weeks ago that representatives from Israel and Turkey met in Azerbaijan recently to cool tensions following events on Syrian soil. According to the source, Israel made it unequivocally clear in the meeting with the Turks that any change of the deployment of foreign forces in Syria, particularly the establishment of Turkish bases around Palmyra, is a red line and will be considered breaking the rules. Israel has already made clear that preventing this threat is the responsibility of the government in Damascus, and that any action endangering Israel will endanger al-Shara's rule, al-Julani's rule in Syria. The Turkish Defense Ministry later attacked Israel, accusing it of undermining Syria's security. Quoted by the local Anadolu agency, the Turks said Israel must abandon its expansionist and occupying stance, and the international community must prevent this criminality to ensure regional security. We urge Israel to cease immediately the attacks that threaten Syria's territorial integrity and undermine its security. I have a comment on all of that. I also want to hear what you guys have to say about all these statements that come against Israel. So Turkey's leaders speak openly about their desire to expand their territory at the expense of their neighbors. Resurrection of the Ottoman Empire, which ruled over most of the Middle East in the past. They routinely violate the sovereignty of Syria and Iraq, and since 1974, they have been occupying 1/3 of the territory of Cyprus. It's an island in the Middle East, after taking it in an unprovoked invasion that violated international law and obligations that Turkey had committed itself to by joining the NATO alliance. So their accusations against Israel are deeply hypocritical, and I think it's time to call them out on their hypocrisy. It doesn't make sense. So now, to stay on the subject of Turkey, the Erdogan regime has taken a very unusual step as the two largest air carriers in Turkey, the Turkish airliners, the Turkish national airliners, and Pegasus, have decided to relinquish their slots at the Israeli Ben Gurion International Airport, indicating they won't resume the operations in Israel at least until after the coming winter. The Turkish carrier's decision marks a significant strategic shift. Initially, When flights were halted at the outbreak of the war in October 2023, it was seen as a temporary suspension. But giving up the slots signals long-term planning and that the companies do not see a near-term return to Israel. For Turkish airliners, once a leader in the Israeli market, this is a significant strategic change. The company run as a business, but partially is owned by the government. And it is relinquishing a route that is considered one of its most profitable. The Istanbul route, the capital of Turkey, mattered not only because of direct demand from Israel, but also because of the connections that it offered the Israeli travelers. It was another gateway to Europe, to America, and to the Far East. And although the airliners act for business motives, the broader political context cannot be ignored. Israel-Turkey relations have seen ups and downs over the years, and it appears that the current situation is influenced business and decisions as well. So finally, the United States President Donald Trump told reporters in the Oval Office this week that we're going to expand the Abraham Accords. Okay, let's see how that goes. Will be amazing. Amazing opportunity for everybody in this region, for Israel to do business with our neighbors. I think that economic cooperation is the way for peace in this region. But we'll see how it goes because there is a lot of opposition by Iran and its proxies to this move. So Trump said that many countries want to join the Abraham Accords. And I think it will happen very quickly. And the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, added, there's a tremendous opportunity to expand the Abraham Accords. No leader works harder to prevent wars or end them than President Donald Trump right now. And we have a president who strives to bring peace to this region. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development regarding Israel and our neighborhood, the Middle East. And we ask you to continue helping us seek and spread the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. And guys, most importantly, don't forget to pray, because this is a spiritual war. So when you pray, make it personal. Keep the hostages in mind. Pray for the IDF soldiers that are fighting to defend this country. And don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Thanks for joining us for another report of Boots on the Ground, and I hope you enjoyed this one.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.co.